Hello, and welcome to another fun and exciting reading tutor video. Um, don't forget to like and subscribe the video, and I'm telling you that in the beginning so I don't forget at the end. So like, subscribe, tell your friends all about reading tutor. Today's video is going to be a bit different, though we're not going to talk about phonics or spelling or basic skills. Instead, we're going to talk about a few books that I read recently. I went on vacation, and of course, my biggest concern when going on vacation is what book to bring. So the book I brought with me was this one, The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test. Read it a long time ago, back when I was in my 20s, liked it, meant to read it again. And this just happened to be the time. There was a reason for that, though, too. The reason was that a few months ago I read this book by Ken Kesey, Sometimes a Great Notion, which I've also been meaning to reread for years. And the reason I reread it now was because I read this book, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And the reason I read One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is because I saw the movie again, and I really liked the movie, and I've been meaning to reread this book, so I did, and it was really good. I did like it the first time. I think it was even better the second time. Of course, being a book, it's different from the movie. The book is through the eyes of the chief, who does belong in a mental institution. And this is one of those books that you should read it. Even if you've seen the movie, read the book. The depth of the story, the characters. It's something you need to read if you've never read it before. And especially if you've seen the movie. Apparently Kesey hated the movie. Didn't like Jack Nicholson in the movie. He had other issues. But this is a book you should read. In fact, after I read this book many years ago, I picked up Sometimes a Great Notion because I had heard about it. Didn't know anything about it, but gave it a shot. I was in my 20s when I read it, and I gotta tell ya, I put it down after about 100 pages. Just couldn't get into it, meant nothing to me, but I kept hearing how great it was over and over throughout the years. So it sat on my bookshelf unread until a few months ago. Again, after I read One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, I thought, okay, it's finally time to give this one a try. And I did it on a trip to New York. I like having lots to read when I take trips. And this time, I got to tell you, it was a whole different experience. This is one of the best books I've ever read. It's I guess, a simple story about some loggers in Oregon, and they're fighting some union members. It's basically conflict between those two, but there's so much more to it, and it's so beautifully written. The thing which I guess a lot of people don't like is at certain parts of the book, he changes points of view frequently. Even in the same paragraph, one character will be talking, and it'll go back and forth from first person to third person. And in the beginning, it was fairly difficult to follow, but once you pick up the rhythm of the book, it's not a big deal, and it just adds to the beauty of the book. Highly recommended. Read this book. Take your time. You'll like it. Which leads me to, or back to, the Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test. Which is the story, I guess it's partially about Ken, no, I shouldn't say partially about Ken Kesey. It's all about Ken Kesey. Apparently he took part in some LSD experiments. Was very impressed with LSD, and convinced some people to gather around him. They referred to themselves as the Merry Pranksters. They got an old school bus. They did some traveling, and they were pretty much stoned on acid a lot of the time. Got other people to try acid, and did some experimenting with it in San Francisco. Ground Zero, hippies, LSD, that whole scene. And this book was a lot of fun to read. I suppose part of it is I kind of like the way Tom Wolfe wrote it. Some people might not like it. The narrative was very busy. He kind of threw in everything but the kitchen sink on some of his descriptions. But I thought he was wildly entertaining. I'm actually going to read a couple of brief passages. This is just describing Kesey's hometown, which, if I remember correctly, and I remember very little correctly, which was in Oregon. But I'm going to read a paragraph, a fairly long paragraph. So hold on to your hat. But of course, the feeling out here at night, free, with the motor running and the adrenaline flowing, cruising in the neon glories of the new American night. It was very heaven to be the first wave of the most extraordinary kids in the history of the world. Only 15, 16, 17 years old, dressed in the haute couture of pink Oxford shirts, sharp pants, snaky half-inch belts, fast shoes. All this with straight 6 and V8 power underneath, and all this neon glamour overhead, which somehow tied in with the technological superheroics of the jet, TV, atomic subs, ultrasonics, post-war American suburbs, glorious world. And the hell with the intellectual badmouthers of Americans' tail-fin civilization. They couldn't know what it was like, or else they had it cultivated out of them. The feeling, to be very super kids, the world's first generation of the little devils, feeling immune beyond calamity. One's parents remembered the sloughing common order, war and depression, but super kids knew only the emotional surge of the great payoff, when nothing was common any longer, the life. A glorious place, a glorious age, I tell you, a very neon renaissance, and the myths that actually touched you at that time, not Hercules, Orpheus, Ulysses, and Aeneas, but Superman, Captain Marvel, Batman, the Human Torch, the Submariner, Captain America, Plastic Man, the Flash. But of course, on Perry Lane, what did they think it was? Quaint, when he talked about the comic book superheroes as the honest American myths? It was a fantasy world already, this electro-pastel world of mom and dad and buddy and sis in the suburbs. There they go in the family car, a white Pontiac Bonneville sedan. The family car, a huge, crazy, god-awful, powerful fantasy creature to begin with. 327 horsepower, shaped like 27 nights of luscious luxury broham seduction. You're already there in Fantasyland. So why not move off your snug harbor quilty bed dead center and cut loose? Go ahead and say it. Shazam! Juice it up to what it's already aching to be. 317,000 horsepower. A whole superhighway long and soaring, screaming on toward Edge City and Ultimate Fantasies, current and future. Billy Batson said Shazam and turned to Captain Marvel. Jay Garrick inhaled an experimental gas in the research lab. And of course he continues from there. So these are the kids who in a few years would float down to Haight-Ashbury, answer the siren's call of drugs, free sex, and all the fun stuff that was going on. One point that Tom Wolfe makes when he's talking about Kesey being in the LSD experiments, talking about the doctors themselves. So the doctors would come in in white smocks with their clipboards, taking blood pressures and heart rates and urine specimens and having them try to solve simple problems in logic and mathematics, such as adding up columns of figures and having them judge time and distances, although they did have them talk into tape recorders too. But the doctors were so out of it, they never took LSD themselves, and they had absolutely no comprehension, and it couldn't be put into words anyway. And there's a lot to that. There are things you can measure and things you can't measure. Ken Kesey and the Merry Pranksters did some things that you can't measure. And Tom Wolfe, like I said, writes about it. The acid tests, the concerts, the Grateful Dead, Kesey being busted, escaping to Mexico, all the people that surrounded Kesey, some of whom became famous, some of who just kind of faded away. But yeah, this is a fascinating book. And I want to read one more short piece. Believe it or not, the police were watching Kesey. They didn't trust him. They didn't trust the Merry Pranksters. Occasionally, they would get pulled over. Neal Cassady was the main driver of the bus. He was able to drive for hours and hours, apparently, because he was on speed. If you read On the Road by Jack Kerouac, you've also met Neal Cassady. But anyways, the cop pulls Cassady over. Let's read that paragraph just for fun. A siren? It's a highway patrolman, which immediately seems like the funniest thing in the history of the world. Smoke is pouring out of the woods and they are all sailing through leaf explosions in the sky, but the cop is bugging about this freaking bus. Oh yeah, they're driving through a wildfire. The cop yanks the bus over to the side and he starts going through a kind of traffic safety inspection of the big, gross bus, while more and more of the smoke is billowing out of the woods. Man, the license plate is on wrong and there's no light over the license plate. And the turn signal looks bad, and how about the brakes? Let's see that handbrake there. Cassady, the driver, is already into a long monologue for the guy, only he is throwing in all kinds of sirs. Well, yes, sir. This is a Hammond bivalve serrated brake, you understand, sir. Had it put on in a truck, rodeo in Springfield, Oregon, had to back through a slalom course of babies' bottles and yellow nappies in the existential culmination of Oregon. Lots of outhouse freaks up there, you understand, sir. A punctual sort of state, sir, yes, sir, holds to 28,000 pounds. 28,000 pounds, you just look right here, sir, tested by a pure-blooded Shell Station attendant in Springfield, Oregon. Winter of 1962, his gumball boots never froze, you understand, sir. 28,000 pounds hold right here. Whereupon he yanks back on the handbrake, as if it's attached to something, which it isn't. It's just dangling there, and jams his foot on the regular brake, and the bus shudders as if the handbrake has a hell of a bite. But the cop is thoroughly befuddled now anyways, because Cassady's monologue has confused him for one thing, and what the hell are these people doing? By this time everybody is off the bus, rolling in the brown grass by the shoulder, laughing and giggling, yahooing, zonked to the skies on acid. Because, man, the woods are burning, the whole world is on fire. And a Cassady monologue on automotive safety is rising up from out of his throat like weeny smoke, as if the green Godspeed were frying in his innards. And the cop, representative of the people of California in this total freaking situation, is all hung up on a handbrake that doesn't exist in the first place. And the cop, all he can see is a bunch of crazies in screaming orange and green costumes, masks, boys and girls, men and women, 12 or 14 of them lying in the grass and making hideously crazy sounds. Christ almighty, why the hell does he have to contend with? So he wheels around and says, What are you, show people? That's right, Officer, Kesey says, we're show people. It's been a long road to hoe, I can tell you, and it's going to be a long road to hoe, but that's the business. Well, says the cop, you fix up those things and... He starts backward off toward the car, cutting up one last look at the crazies. And watch it next time. And he goes on off. So yeah, lots of fun and excitement. Reading this book, it reminded me of my own childhood in Livonia, Michigan, which was after all this took place. I was too young to know about it until years later, but in the Detroit area, we kind of had our own hippie scene, which I was too young to take part in. But that's another story for another day. But anyways, recommended reading. And I will see you again next time in another fun and exciting reading tutor video. Thank you for watching. Again, like, subscribe, tell your friends, etc. Later, Gators.